Oh, well, good evening, my fellow followers of the macabre. As you can see, I was just selecting tonight's story from the Fury Duty collection. I think it's a good one. I think you'll have a great time. So please hang tight. We're going to run our introduction, and we'll be back after this. Well, good evening, all, and once again, welcome to Joe Townsel's Dreadtime Stories. I encourage you to wrap your hands around your favorite cup of hot cocoa, or if it relaxes you more, wrap your hands around that obnoxious neighbor or kid that just won't be quiet. Whatever makes you feel better. We are going to have a wonderful story for you tonight, I believe. It is called Take a Picture. And as you can see, Joe Townsel's Dreadtime Stories delves deep into the twisted tales of the weirdness of my mind. So please, I appreciate you joining me. We will be, I encourage you, of course, to leave comments along the way. We may have some comments at the midpoint. There will be a commercial break, wink, wink. And we'll definitely have some at the end of the story. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy. I always endeavor to give you a Dreadtime story, a nightmare to haunt your dreams. And here we go with Joe Townsel's Dreadtime story for tonight from the Fury Duty collection, Take a Picture. The blonde in the red convertible sped across the desert, and the trucker, clad in black, followed. Fernley, Nevada is the best sight ever in your rearview mirror. I was embarking on what promised to be a brutal and boring assignment. Photojournalism is a highly competitive racket, and I'm a mediocre photog in an industry populated by real talent. As such, I'm hardly in a position to turn up my nose at any paying gig. Still, I would have welcomed something anywhere else, even a trek along Route 66. At least on that stretch of road I could have gotten my kicks. Instead, I found myself on the most infamous segment of Route 50. As the view of Fernley, population 20,000, thank you very much, receded in my rear view, I approached one of many route markers reminding me just how much in the middle of nowhere I found myself. Route 50, the loneliest road in America. Beyond that is 300 miles of sand and tumbleweeds, offering about a half dozen road stands and one pump gas stations along the infinite route, until I reached the end of the line in Ely. Population 4,000. Salute! This unremarkable stretch of blacktop features absolutely no points of interest, and AAA recommends the faster, smoother interstates that subdivide the state. I set the cruise control at 55, forcing myself not to rush, as I began what I was convinced would be a futile search for anything interesting. I spy with my little eye something that started with the letter D. Miles to go through the desert before I sleep. 2 days prior, I got the call from Dale Barnard, or is it Bernard, who introduced himself as the managing editor of a new photo essay magazine called Nevada Highways. I stifled a chuckle at the blatant ripoff of title from Arizona's premier travel periodical. Dale must have realized how silly it sounded, and quickly added that it was only a working title. As he described the assignment, collecting artistic photos along Highway 50 between Fernley and Ely, I quietly Googled both towns and the isolated road that connected them. Anyone else desperately seeking work would have been wise and kept her mouth shut. Nevertheless, I spoke up. I admit, despite my better judgment, I was probably trying to sabotage the gig in order to keep my cute little butt in my air-conditioned home in Phoenix. "I really appreciate the offer, Dale," I said, "but I am curious. Newsweeklies decades ago." Dale didn't suppress his own chuckle. "Precisely my point," he said. "I'm looking for a new, contemporary take, which will help keep my debut issue on the map. Plus, frankly, I'm looking for a woman's perspective for this piece." "A woman's perspective? For a camera full of snapshots of flat, boring desert?" I let a slightly awkward pause creep into the interview as I checked my bank account online. For all Dale knew, I was checking my calendar. As I suspected, and dreaded, taking this assignment and its upfront 25% advance will prevent about a half dozen checks from bouncing. "Well, what do you think?" Dale asked. I closed my laptop. "You've got a deal. Thanks very much for thinking of me, Dale." He and I finalized the details. I gathered my photography equipment, including my most important piece, which I never leave home without. I called ahead to rent a snazzy red convertible, as I was given no limits on my expense account. This way, I could ride with the top down, my blonde hair flowing in the wind. Also, I didn't want to take any chances with AC in the middle of that hot hell on earth. I might need the open air to stay reasonably cool. Finally, I booked a room at a one-star motor lodge at the end destination in Ely. The prestigious-sounding Ely Motor Lodge. Hopefully, I wouldn't find myself bunking down in some roach motel. But I didn't hold out much hope for luxury accommodations. 2 days later, I'm cruising leisurely down Route 50, enjoying glorious two-way traffic, seeking the picturesque sights of the desolate Great Basin. What choice did I have? I pulled the convertible to the side of the road where I spotted my first photo opportunity. A buzzard was happily ripping at the flesh of a dead deer, taking delight in pulling at the tendons of the poor road-killed animal. The scavenger bird took notice of me. He soon determined that I was still alive, lost interest in me, and went back to his tasty venison. I took several photos with my Nikon D4S. It was an older camera, and I had to have it repaired a while back, but it still got the job done. I didn't think Dale would be looking for desert wildlife pics of one of the beasts being devoured by another. But hey, you never know. It's never a rejection process, but only one of selection. I looked at the road just ahead of me. There was a large pool of blood. The deer was a recent kill, but its blood was already drying to dark crimson in the desert sun. Soon, it would be indistinguishable from the blacktop itself. I took a few photos of the blood streaks on the road while I still had the opportunity. It was mainly in the opposite lane, suggesting the driver had been traveling in the opposite direction. I found it odd the kill was fresh because I hadn't passed any other motorist heading toward Fernley. The deer must have been struck by something no less than a huge semi-truck or the like. Then, the deer was flung through the air to its final resting place several yards away, providing a nice banquet for the buzzard circling nearby. The poor deer was probably only looking for a little snack of its own when it got creamed. What's the last thing that goes through a bug's mind when it hits your windshield? Its ass. I looked at the road behind me. No skid marks. No tire tracks in the dirt alongside. Whoever drove the large vehicle that killed the deer apparently made no attempt to slow or stop. A real nice guy. I bid adieu to Mr. Buzzard as he continued to tug at the flesh of its lunch. Enjoy your deer tartare, pretty birdie. My photos taken, I got back in the convertible and pulled back onto Highway 50. Subsequent stalks were more pleasant. At my next to last photography stop, about midway between Fernley and Ely, I downloaded a few hundred shots from the Nikon to my MacBook. I probably had more than enough of a selection to satisfy Dale.
And absent a miracle, I didn't anticipate the need for more photos. The stretch of road ahead looked like it was only offering more of the same dull landscape. So I continued down Route 50. Some miles down the road, that miracle occurred. I stopped once more to photograph a landscape I truly found inspiring. I was taking some photos of what appeared to be a beautiful red rock formation. Appeared, since I wasn't sure if it was actually red rock. It hardly mattered. Dell specified this should be from the perspective of a ditzy female anyway. In addition, my understanding was that the tentatively titled Nevada Highways magazine was going to be a grainy black and white periodical printed on cheap pulp stock. I attempted to Google the potential natural wonder of my cell, but of course, there was no signal or data out here in this barren wasteland. Regardless, the rock formation was pretty. I needed something life-affirming on my camera's memory stick to balance the death and carnage of the deer. I had crossed the road to take the photos to get the best angles for the time of day. It was a peaceful and calming 10 minutes, despite the oppressive heat. I was ready to cross the road back to my rental car when I spotted the semi-trailer truck, approaching quickly and heading my way. The truck was like a juggernaut, and God help anyone or anything that... It was painted in a hideous crimson. Sections of orange revealed the carelessly maintained paint job had been consumed with oxidation. I immediately froze in my tracks and moved back several steps to give the driver a wide berth. I recognized the truck as a Mack, which was pulling a single trailer of unknown cargo. My gaze momentarily froze, looking at the grille. The Mack logo and much of the surrounding metal was saturated with blood. I couldn't be sure, but it appeared that chunks of flesh were embedded in the grille. I had encountered the deer's vehicular executioner, no doubt about it. I wondered how the driver had fallen behind me. I was certain I hadn't passed him, heading in the opposite direction. It seemed he was ahead of me, somehow hid in the open desert, that came up from behind. There certainly weren't any truck stops or massage parlors out here for a lonely, tired trucker to get a chilly size or a happy ending. The only answer at which I could arrive was that the truck driver spotted a new fellow traveler, then held back to greet me in a more dramatic fashion. The trucker blared the horn. 3 short tugs with the cord, not a warning, more like a sickening, unwelcome pickup line. A horrifying thought kicked my paranoia into overdrive. What if this maniac went out of his way to hit and kill the deer? The bloodstreak was the opposite lane of the direction he must have been heading. Did he swerve to kill the animal, then go on his merry way without hesitation? What if this maniac found me an even more tempting target? I took several involuntary steps backward, away from the road. But the trucker didn't swerve toward me. Instead, he allowed the massive vehicle to creep onto the dirt shoulder on the other side of the road, where my rental car was parked. He blasted the horn again. I began waving my arms like a madwoman, signaling the obvious forthcoming collision. I couldn't make out the trucker's face completely, but there was no mistaking the lunatic's uproarious laughter. He never slowed the vehicle. In fact, he accelerated. He was still barreling on a collision course with the helpless red convertible. The right side of the Mack truck kicked up dust and rocks, making it impossible to clearly see anything. Dirt and pebbles sprayed over me like shrapnel. At the last moment, the insane driver swerved the speeding truck back fully onto the blacktop. As he sped past, and after the dust had cleared for a few seconds, I was relieved to see the car was undamaged. But the convertible and its renter were covered in grime from the trucker's wild ride. I finally found my voice through my terror, trying to catch my breath. "Asshole!" I shouted. I still had my camera in hand and took several shots of the back of the truck as it sped away. But no such luck. The dirt and dust were still too thick. The trucker gave me 2 quick blats of the horn. He then showed me the middle finger of his left hand as a parting gesture. I imagined he was still enjoying his belly laugh and guffaws. The only thing I could make out through the dust cloud was the truck's mud flaps. You know, the kind with the shape of a naked girl on them. Perfect. It took me over 15 minutes to clean out the car and dust off myself. My dilemma was this. I was more than halfway to Eli, now the closest sign of civilization from where I now stood. I knew that if I turned around and headed back to Fernley, I would find no services on the return trip. I couldn't remember seeing a gas station, and I might run perilously low on fuel if I tried going back. I tried my cell phone again. Still no signal or data. No way to know what services were available straight ahead. Still, if I pressed on to Eli, I was reasonably sure I'd be alright. Hopefully the maniac trucker had his fun with me and was already long gone down the highway looking for someone else to harass. I decided that fortune favors the foolish and continued toward Eli on Route 50. I had traveled 20 miles further when I spotted Jake's Gas and Grub. It was little more than a 7-Eleven wannabe with simple gas pumps. Parked in front was the killer truck which nearly destroyed my rental convertible. My better judgment told me to keep driving and put as much distance between me and this insane trucker as possible. Instead, my fury took over and I pulled next to the pump. There was really no choice actually, since I needed to top off the tank. Regardless, I was ready to confront the jerk who scared the crap out of me. I went inside and spotted him immediately. He was a huge fat slob with an unkempt bushy beard. Well, no surprise there. He wore an old torn baseball cap. No doubt he was hiding his male pattern baldness, which often went hand in hand with a beer belly. Dirty leather vest and stained torn t-shirt. Jeans that hadn't been washed since the last election, and scuffed boots that had definitely seen better days. This must be the guy. He was nearly twice my size, but I wasn't intimidated. I walked quickly, almost ran toward him. Before he could use his limited brain power to form a complete sentence, I shoved him as hard as I could. He took one step backward to balance his bulk. I nearly fell on my ass. Immobile object meets less than irresistible force. "Geez, lady," he said, surprised. "What the hell was that about?" "What was that about?" I screamed. "How about terrorizing me by nearly hitting my... What's the matter with you, you fucking nutcase?" "I don't know what you're talking about, missy." He stayed calm, perfect demeanor, and understandable since he thought he was dealing with his own nutcase. "I'm not a trucker," he continued. "I own this place. I'm Jake." Caught off guard, I took a quick look around the mini-mart. The standard treats, beer, and fountain soda. There was nobody else in the place. "But the truck outside," I said weakly, quite embarrassed. "I saw it," Jake said. "Once in a while a trucker pulls in and grabs a quick catnap before coming inside. I don't mind so long as they don't hog all the space in my parking lot." Jake smiled at the irony of his own statement. I doubted he had had more than one customer in this place at the same time, more than once or twice a year. "I'm so sorry," I said. I pointed at the truck and its driver outside. "Has this one come inside yet?" "No. He pulled in about a half hour ago and immediately laid down for a quick snooze. Didn't think anything of it until just now. Is he bothering you?" "Yes, terrorizing me, in fact. I couldn't see him clearly before, but I could tell he was an ugly son of a bitch." "I thought you were him." "No offense." Jake laughed. "Well, none taken, ma'am. My youth is a distant memory, and I'm well past the point of winning any beauty contest." "Call the cops yet?" "I tried. No signal out here." Jake walked to the far end of his quaint convenience store toward an ancient payphone. He picked up the receiver, revealing a rotary handset. He dug in his pocket, retrieved a dime, and popped it in. 'Not a quarter or 50 cents, but a dime. He dialed 7 digits, not 3. Hello? Highway Patrol? I'm calling from Jake's out on Route 50. Jake. So I'm starting with you. I have a woman here who's been harassed by a truck driver who's parked here. He paused as if listening to a response. Then, he took the receiver away from his ear, looking at it with frustration. He uttered a curse under his breath and replaced it in the cradle. I'm sorry, ma'am, he said. I've been having trouble with this phone cutting out during a call. I contacted the phone company about it, but they haven't seen fit to send anyone out to fix it. As if Jake's apology to me was a cue, the hideous red Mack truck's engine roared to life. I ran outside for a clear view. The truck lurched forward, then its movement steadied. Behind the wheel was a crazy driver, smiling with self-congratulatory glee. The brim of his dusty, torn black cowboy hat made it difficult to see his eyes. He put on outdated aviator shades, making it impossible. He waved at me, flashing a yellow, toothy grin, itself partially obscured by a cheesy, untrimmed crumb-catcher mustache. How do you do, ma'am? Free mustache rides here. But like his buddy, and I now suspected the two men were in cahoots, the trucker was dressed in black, at least from the waist up. Unlike his buddy, this guy was thin as a rail. His western-cut shirt fitted snug against his torso, held closed by his small metal buttons, accented with turquoise. He looked like a comical and sinister hybrid of Johnny Cash and that cowboy character in The Village People. He and his hideous truck rolled on down Route 50. This all happened in the span of 10 seconds, which was the amount of time the proprietor of Jake's Gas and Grub needed to follow me outside. The 10 quick steps left him gasping for breath. Damn, he said. Looked like he was lying in wait after all. Lying in wait? How dramatic. Yeah, I replied, close call. Quite a coincidence he decided to take off right after your call to Highway Patrol got cut off. Jake didn't reply, ignoring my implied accusation that the trucker were in cahoots. Besides, the cops should be on their way, despite and because of the lost call. But I knew no one from the Nevada Highway Patrol was coming anytime soon. Maybe you should come back inside for a while, Jake said. I have a sitting area in the back where you can wait for that guy to get a little further down the road. Jake did a bad job of suppressing the faint leer on his face. The offer to hang out definitely wasn't for altruistic reasons. Thanks, but I need to push on. I'm on deadline. Besides, that crazy SOB might find another place to wait for me anyway. Nothing but open spaces, with no services for the next 60 miles. If he pulls over, you'll spot him a mile away, and you can always double back if you need to. I smiled at him. My smile was devoid of humor or appreciation of his transparent invitation. On second thought, I won't move on right away, I said. There's something I want to do here first. If you agree, of course. Jake's grin broadened, resenting the truckers. His teeth were also a sickly shade of yellow, and were in desperate need of a good cleaning. A few of his non-pearly off-whites had already jumped ship and were long gone. Darling, he said, I think you'll find me agreeable to anything you request. I smiled again, more flirtatious this time. It's just this. I explained to him the nature of my photography assignment. Oh, so that's the deadline you mentioned, he asked. Yes, your store here and the proprietor would be a perfect fit for the photo essay I'm putting together. My editor will send you a generous stipend, and it's free advertising for you and your business here. What do you say? Hell yeah, sounds like fun. Well, great, go on inside then, Jake. I just need to get my equipment. He complied, and I unlocked the trunk of my convertible. I gathered my Nikon. I wasn't yanking Jake's chain entirely. Some shots of his gas and grub would add a nice human interest element to my photo shoot. I re-entered the mini-mart, catching Jake a little off guard, I think. He had removed his ball cap. He was desperately arranging his remaining greasy strands into a comb-over to hide his chrome dome, and failing miserably. I knew he was a baldy. I appreciate the attempt, I said, chuckling a bit, but I think the hat makes the outfit. Oh, okay, he said, stammering. His face became beet red as he replaced the hat. His grooming efforts had been for naught. The impromptu photo session went very well. Although Jake's merchandise was unremarkable, the nature of the place would make for an intriguing retro still images. All the fixtures and appliances were straight out of the 50s, right down to the manual cash register at the counter and the actual Cracker Barrel in the corner. Quite a collection of vintage stuff you have here, Jake. He stiffened a bit. It all suits me and works just fine, he snorted. Well, except for the phone. Oh, no offense intended, Jake, I cooed, flicking my finger under his chin. I like antiques. Have one or two myself. Well, no offense taken, darling. Your turn now. I need to get some shots of you, but first I'd like to get out of these hot and dusty clothes. That got his undivided attention. He was able to keep his eyes from bulging in anticipation of what else I might offer. Dream on, dude. Is there some place where I can change? Well, you're welcome to use my sitting area through the door there. There's a nice pull-out sofa in there. Pretty comfy. Of course, he had to specify it was a pull-out sofa. Well, nothing ventured, nothing gained, I suppose. Well, thanks, Jake. But if you have a ladies' room, that'll be just fine. Ladies is outside around the back, but I'm embarrassed to admit it's pretty nasty. Haven't had a chance to scrub it lately. Are you sure you wouldn't prefer the sitting room? He smiled, bearing those putrid troppers. I promise I won't peek. For all I knew, he had a peephole drilled right into the connecting wall of his sitting area and the restroom. Just like Norman Bates in Psycho. Even if he got an eyeful, let him have his fun. It wouldn't last long. The ladies' room would be just fine, I repeated. Well, then suit yourself. He handed me the key, stereotypically attached to a brick slightly smaller than a cinder block. I went back to the car and got my new outfit. I also retrieved my other camera, my favorite camera, and the one I preferred to use for personal portraits. Jake was fibbing about the condition of the ladies' room. It was a challenge changing into my red mini dress while making as little contact as possible with any surface. But there was no choice but to stand on the filthy concrete floor, and I made the best of it. I touched up my makeup using the shattered foggy mirror above the grime-streaked sink. I went back into the store. Jake's eyes bulged as much as his sockets would allow. His jaw dropped to his chin as well. Wow, is that for me? He said, with a small spittle of drool appearing at the right corner of his mouth. I laughed at his adolescent reaction. Sure, why not? But first, let's finish our business. No argument from Jake. I took just one photo of Jake with my portrait camera, which was all I ever needed. I don't think he ever even noticed I was using a different device. With that single photo taken, my session at Jake's Gas and Grub was concluded. It was now time to take care of other business with the proprietor. Jake had retrieved 3 large bottles of Aquafina and put them on the counter. On the house, he offered, remember, no services for 60 miles. Well, thank you, big guy, I said. His expression soured a bit. Here was a big guy who had probably been called big guy his entire life, and hated it. But today, from me, he would put up with it. I went to the cooler and got 3 new bottles of water. Jake was perplexed, probably a little offended. They would put up with that too. I was taking no chances by taking the ones he had just handled. Sealed twist caps were no guarantee the bottles had not been tampered with. I'll fill your tank, he said, also gratis for you. Well, that's very generous. Let's take care of that when I leave. Remember, there's no services for the next 60 miles. I want to take full advantage of all the services you offer before I hit the road again. Again, no argument from Jake. My business now concluded at Jake's. I stored my gear and filled the tank. Although Jake offered to do it for me, I preferred to pump my own gas. No need to risk some foreign substance being slipped into the tank, which might disable the convertible and leave me trapped here with my eager host. The Nikon was secured back in the truck, but I kept my other camera on the passenger seat, in front with me. It just might come in handy in a bit. I decided to keep my red mini dress on, doing my best Christy Brinkley from National Lampoon's Vacation. There was something to be said that I was probably the sexiest woman on the stretch of Route 50. Admittedly, probably the only woman. Besides, the dress really was much cooler, and I didn't want to wear my dirty t-shirt and jeans, soiled courtesy of that maniac trucker up ahead. I patted my camera sitting on the passenger seat. I fondled it a bit, if I'm being honest. It's a precious family heirloom after all. Refueled and refreshed in every way that matters, I put the convertible in gear and hit the road. I looked back for a moment before looking again. Jake's Gas and Grub is the best sight ever in your rearview mirror.
Well, so ends part one, and I have to put this to everybody. We all know them. Maybe on occasion we have been one of them, and I'm referring, of course, to the notoriously camera shy. But as we're going to see in part two, maybe there's a good reason to be camera shy on occasion. So stay tuned for part two. I see that the chat is very lively tonight. I look forward to talking to you at the end of the story. Please keep commenting away, and we will talk to you after the story is finished. But first, before we continue with part two, a heartwarming, or maybe it's a heart-stopping, holiday message from our sponsor.
Dancing in silver air, joy and wonder are everywhere. Stories shared by firelight. Ho, ho, horror, what's beneath the tree? Ho, ho, horror, gifts as far as you can see. Every story has a turn when the shadows come to call. Ho, 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 best gift of them all. Pages turning in the dark, tales that leave their lasting mark. Every gift wrapped just for you holds a nightmare coming true. The stories crawl across your mind, leave reality behind. When darkness falls on Christmas Eve, there's no escape, you cannot leave. A tree, ho, ho, horror, now you finally see. Every story has a cost when the creature comes to call. Ho, 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 claims us one and all.
Well, I have to thank John Weber for his production of our great holiday spots for JoeTownsel.com. And, visit the website for all your horror fiction needs. Speaking of which, let's proceed now with part two of Take a Picture.
The blonde in the red convertible sped across the desert, and the trucker clad in black followed. Jake was correct in that I would encounter the trucker again down the road a ways. About 15 miles after I left the mini-mart, I spotted the Mack truck and its trailer parked, indicating that the truck was the convertible. The truck began to rumble and lurch forward. I gambled the truck's cargo was heavy, and I could pass the truck before it acquired much speed. I began to overtake the Mack. I was alarmed to see that the truck was quickly picking up speed, but the trailer remained stationary. The bastard had unlocked his trailer while he waited for me to leave Jake's and eventually catch up to him. Nice trick. It sure fooled me for a minute. As I passed the truck, now relieved of its cargo, I could see the trucker's savage, toothy grin. now more broad and sinister than before. He was now chewing on a toothpick, and he tipped the brim of his cowboy hat to greet me. "Well, howdy, ma'am. Pleased to make your acquaintance." His sunglasses reflected the glare of the desert floor. He put his pedal to the metal and twisted the steering wheel hard to the left. In response, I also turned hard left, swerving into the other lane and onto the dirt alongside, barely avoiding collision with the monstrous truck. I thanked God I was in such a desolate place, so that there was no one else speeding toward me in the opposite lane of the two-way road. I kicked up a cloud of sand and rock, the back end of the convertible fishtailing from left to right as I corrected the steering to get back onto the blacktop. I had put some distance between my rental car and the truck as I passed, but lost that small lead as I struggled to get back on the road. His truck was planted securely on the road and gaining fast. In seconds, blowing kisses to me from the driver's window from the truck's cab. He ran his tongue over his lips a few times for added enticement. I finally managed to turn back onto the road and pull away from the truck. It fell further behind for a minute or so. Then, alarmingly, it began to catch up again. My gutless and apparently poorly maintained rental car was protesting our speed. The engine whined as the transmission was unable to shift to a higher gear. The temperature gauge began to creep toward H. The truck was now overtaking my puny sports car easily. Nearly 10 tons of expertly controlled vehicular momentum was closing fast on the tail end of my lame-ass convertible. Jesus, what did he have under that hood? The trucker had been toying with me moments before. He let me pull away for a bit. He didn't enjoy just the hunt. He got off on the sport as well. Killing a deer and leaving it on the side of the road for buzzard chow was one thing. But the sexy blonde in the red convertible, that's a whole different ball of wax. I can toy with her for a while. Well, Buster, two could play that game. As he barreled down on my rear bumper, I was forced to move to the opposite lane or risk being run off the road again. He pulled alongside on the right, again keeping pace. Yee-haw! Did this asshole really yell that? Alas, yes. It was an unmistakable rallying cry, even under the roar of his truck's engines. Even under the roar of his truck's engine. He pulled down a microphone attached to the top of his cab. "Having fun yet, sweet tits?" His lecherous voice blared over his PA system, as did the guttural laugh that followed. I showed him my middle finger in response. "Oh yeah, please," he said, cackling again. "But don't cheat me on the foreplay." Just ahead there was a small mountain. Route 50 stretched across it, at what appeared to be about 5 or 6% grade. I hoped that no matter the power under the truck's hood, it would have to slow to a much lower speed. Struggle as well. The temperature gauge needle was halfway to H and still creeping up to the right. Overheating might be inevitable. We both began to ascent up the mountain base and downshifted. As I'd hoped, the truck began to fall behind, but only gradually. The convertible should have gone uphill like a gunshot. But why should I be surprised it wasn't? Who knows when the last time this piece of shit was serviced properly? I was forced to slow my ascent as well. I think I can, I know I can. In a few miles, the convertible was over the hump and now speeding downhill. The truck was behind me, but not far enough to guarantee I could make my escape on the remaining stretch of the loneliest road in America. As I finished the descent to flat ground, the trucker was beginning his. He was no more than a few miles behind and was no longer hindered by an uphill grade. In fact, he now had the steep downhill slope to help him regain his truck's momentum. Once again, he was gaining fast. In the distance, to the right, there was a ravine. It was the only break in the otherwise completely smooth desert floor. I couldn't tell how deep the ravine was exactly, but it would be enough. I slowed, hoping the trucker would overtake me before we passed the ravine. Beyond it was only another endless stretch of unrestricted open space. The Mack truck roared up behind me quickly. I moved cautiously to the opposite lane, allowing the trucker to once again pull alongside and keep pace. It had been quite a chase, like something out of an old Dennis Weaver TV movie. It had been fun, this I'll admit, but playtime was over. The trucker and I made eye contact, neither of us paying attention to the road ahead. But there was no need. In those moments, we were the only two people in the world. A hot pursuit, high-speed chase, Adam and Eve. I blew him a kiss and flashed my sexiest, most seductive smile. He laughed uproariously and reached again for his microphone. "Now that's more like it, baby! Love how you got all dolled up for me. Did you make yourself all sexy for me? Well then pull on over." Knowing I couldn't be heard over the engine noise, I just continued to stare at him. My own smile broadened, anticipating what he might say next. "Take a picture! It'll last longer!" Well, what a fabulous idea. I held up my index finger, signaling that I had a very special surprise for him. I reached for the camera on the passenger seat. I was glad I thought ahead to have it handy. I gave it a pat before taking a hold more firmly for immediate use. The camera is a Polaroid one-step, or at least an incredible knockoff, since there are no identifying manufacturing markings. It's just like the one first made in 1977, which spit out instant hard prints from its slot in the front. Point and shoot, using the tantalizing red button on the front, built-in flash, and fixed focus. This one even had some kind of advanced auto zoom, which wasn't even a feature available with the cameras of the time. Despite how I framed the subject through the viewfinder or my distance from him, always displayed exactly the desired cropping. All the conveniences of a point-and-shoot shuttering craves. What could be easier? The resulting square photo is held in place by thick, white rectangular paper, with its own negative held in place in between. The print is not the highest quality in the conventional sense, but the camera's other function is beyond measure. This makes the camera my most treasured family heirloom, and is what got me interested in photography as a kid. I got a firm grasp on the camera and pointed it towards the trucker. I positioned my index finger over the red button, ready to fire it like a weapon, and opened the shutter. The trucker laughed, very satisfied with himself. "Hold on, you sexy thing!" he shouted over the PA system. "Let me give you my best pose!" The trucker replaced the microphone in its slot above his head. He put his left hand over his mouth, then spread the third and fourth fingers apart. He flicked his tongue between the open fingers, the universal pantomime for cunnilingus. What a classy boy. I freed my second hand from the steering wheel, temporarily controlling the direction of the convertible with my knees. I gave the trucker an exaggerated thumbs up, asking him to hold his pose. He complied, happily. He was still enthusiastically mimicking oral stimulation of the female genitalia when I snapped his picture. I pressed the red button, and the undeveloped print was ejected instantly. It would take a couple of minutes for the image to appear completely, but I could not wait. The trucker himself disappeared from the cab of his truck. He vanished, but not without a trace. The Mack truck, now without a driver, slowed and gradually veered off the blacktop. When it was well off the road, I pulled over to watch the rest of its lumbering journey across the sagebrush plain. The lonely truck continued advancing along its final route, disrupting a small pack of coyotes. They fled the advancing vehicle. I hope that none were caught in the truck's path. We didn't need more wildlife casualties on Route 50 this day. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, the truck reached the ravine, and tumbled down. It appeared to be quite deep after all, and the entire vehicle disappeared from view as it fell into the hole. The crash was deafening, even from such a distance. But the sound of the crash was nearly silent compared to the thunderous explosion which followed. I shielded my eyes from the massive fireball. It was as if hell had erupted through the desert floor onto the surface of Earth. I imagined the fire would burn for quite some time. There were no other vehicles on that stretch of Route 50. I looked up to the blinding sky. No exhaust trails from planes passing overhead, so far as I could see. Nevertheless, the inferno would catch someone's attention eventually. An uncontrolled fire of this magnitude would not go unnoticed for long. If a Mack truck explodes in the desert, and there's no one to see it, is it really burning? I started the convertible's engine, and was relieved to see the temperature had cooled to a normal level. I would continue to make my way to Eli, but leisurely. I was now a happy camper. There was one less asshole in the world. I pulled back onto Route 50 to complete the last leg of my trip. The blazing hulk of an asshole's truck is the best sight ever, in your rearview mirror and otherwise. I was enjoying some of Eli's scrumptious cuisine in one of its finer dining establishments. And I have to say, they make a great cheeseburger and fries for a dive bar. It was the icy cold mug of beer that really hit the spot though, after the day I'd had. There was a local news item earlier. Everyone else ignored it, but it caught my attention when the story came on the TV above the bar. It was a brief mention of a truck crashing and burning near Route 50, about 50 miles from Eli. Strangely, the truck's trailer was located several miles down the road, and no human remains had been recovered, as of yet. The news anchor quickly moved to the next item up on the teleprompter. I wondered how long it would take for someone to realize that the proprietor of Jake's Gas and Grub had disappeared, and if that would even rate a bulletin, even on a slow news day. I didn't give shit one. I would be long gone. I had picked a booth in the far corner. The place was quiet and the lighting low, which was a blessing. I went back to my burger. It was so tasty. My very special Polaroid knockoff rested on the seat next to me, like a loyal pet secure and sleeping next to its master. The camera was given to me by my mother, may she rest in peace. She educated me as to its magical qualities when she considered me to be of age in my teens. Before that, I was still a little girl. She told me that her husband, my father, had abandoned us. She never changed her story, but in my heart, I know she took his picture and he disappeared. I'll never know why, and it's not important. My daddy had been immortalized in a way no man could ever anticipate. I also brought in my photo album. It's the old-fashioned kind with clear plastic overlays on every page, just sticky enough to hold the prints in place. I had it open to the first page inside with available space. I had made a decision. I must make it every time I take a picture with my most unusual camera, and this would be a tough call. Most, but not all, of the subjects captured by the camera's sorcery are selected for inclusion in the album. My mother's album is safely locked away at home in Phoenix. That volume was completed and locked upon her passing. It will never be expanded. When I inherited her album, my first action was to look for the hard print of my father. I wasn't surprised when I didn't find it, but I'm certain it did exist once upon a time, however briefly. Someday, I hope to have a daughter of my own. It's my dream to pass on to her this precious legacy. So, my decision remained. I had two photos, one of Jake and the other of the trucker. It's a shame I never got his name. If I decide to put his photo in the album, I'll just have to use his former occupation as a label. I studied both photos. Great shots, if I do say so myself. Both men were frozen with expressions of terror, captured in the millisecond as the camera stole their immortal souls, permanently trapped on film. Unless I decided to omit one of them from the album. I was especially amused by the trucker's photo. One moment he's making a vulgar gesture to me. The next, he's screaming like a little bitch in a Polaroid photo. Whee! I browsed through my album again. There's a photo of a bad first date from a year ago. There's another of an abusive ex-boyfriend. A cousin who got out of line at a family reunion. Another ex who couldn't keep his eyes off other women's breasts. Just to name a few. Ultimately, I decided to add Jake's photo to the album. Yet, compared to most of the others in the book, but the look of dumbfounded terror on his face is priceless. It will provide me with giggles for some time. There's still one available spot in the album, next to Jake. It seemed appropriate to put him next to his cohort for all time. But I decided against adding it to the album. I pull out the photo book when I'm feeling low. Seeing these men immortalized and imprisoned within always perks me up. But seeing the trucker only made me grimace upon successive glances. No eye candy there, he had to go. I pinched the photo at the top, with the thumbs and index fingers of both hands. I brought it up to my right ear. It's like picking up a seashell on the beach. If you listen closely, you can hear the ocean, or in this case, if you listen closely, you can hear him scream. As I began to tear the trucker's photo in half, I listened intently, tuning out the sounds around me. I ripped the photo in half very slowly. I heard the bastard shrieking in agony from somewhere deep within his Polaroid prison. His muted, high-pitched yowl reminded me of Alvin the Chipmunk. This sent me into hysterics. I got a few curious looks from other bar patrons, but they went back to their libations when they saw it was just a dingy blonde amusing herself in the corner. I tossed the two halves of the photo on the table and took a chug from my beer. I grinned when two small splotches of blood leaked from the torn edges of the photo. Each tiny pool of blood slowly flowed from where the image of the trucker's head had been bisected vertically right down the middle. The two splashes of blood flowed into each other, forming a unified puddle about the size of a quarter. I closed my photo album and placed it gently on the seat next to the camera. That dude's pretty ugly. I don't blame you for ripping up that photo. I was too enthralled and mesmerized by my little ritual to notice the approach of the cute little boy toy. They're not all keepers, I said, smiling. It looks like you dropped the pieces on a bit of ketchup. It looks like. He sat at my booth without waiting for my invitation, but I didn't mind. He was very young and cocky, but without any real self-confidence. His sun-tanned face was swarthy, set off by heavily greased black hair. He was easily 10 years my junior, but I cleaned up pretty nicely earlier in Jake's bathroom, so I was definitely worth the young man's attention. Besides, as I looked around the bar, I determined that the potential pickings for would-be Don Juans must be mighty slim in this one-horse town. If my local Lothario here wanted me to be his cougar, that was definitely doable. After all, a cougar is a predatory cat who enjoys the hunt and sport. I'm Travis, he said, extending his hand. I shook with him. Amanda. A fake name, of course. Amanda, he said, pulling out his smooth, very white voice. You are by far the hottest chick here tonight. Not a great compliment. I was a swan among pigs in this joint. Best of a bad lot, I asked. You know what I mean, he said, flustered. Oh, just kidding, Travis. You're cute, too. This brightened his demeanor. Are you old enough to frequent this establishment, Travis? Absolutely. 23 next month. I could tell he was curious about my age, but he knew better than to inquire. And I didn't volunteer that little detail. I let his fantasies run wild. So what do you do, Amanda? Freelance photojournalist. I just finished a project in the area. Oh, wow, that's awesome. I had a feeling. He pointed at the photo album and the Polaroid knockoff camera. That's a very interesting camera, very retro. He used retro hesitantly, not wanting to offend me. I wasn't. As I told Jake, I loved old things. Yes, indeed, I don't use that for my work, only for personal pleasure. Cool. May I see it? I suppose so. Just be careful, please. I handed him the camera gingerly, feigning concern over accidental damage. It was an act, of course. No one knows the origin of the Polaroid knockoff camera, whether it's supernatural or was just shat from the bowels of hell. But one thing I learned long ago, this camera was indestructible. I have no doubt it will outlast me and my progeny. Travis took the camera with both hands, very carefully. Weird, he said. It feels warm. Did you just use it? Foolish boy toy. Even a real Polaroid doesn't get hot to the touch after taking a picture. My camera was becoming, well, aroused at the prospect of taking another photo. It was hot to trot. Yes, that must be it, I said. That's the trick. A lie. And can you still find film for it? Not a problem. It's easy to find online. Another lie. I've never purchased film for my magical, mystical Polaroid knockoff. I never even loaded film into the camera. As far as I can tell, it has no ejectable tray to hold an instant film pack. Whenever a picture is taken, the print just appears. Travis pointed the camera at me. Does anyone ever take a photograph of the photographer, he asked coyly. Not often enough. I fluffed my hair and smiled. Fire away. Travis took the picture with my camera, but I had nothing to worry about, of course. It's my camera. I didn't vanish when the print ejected from the slot. He looked at the photo. The image area is still a solid gray. Did I do something wrong, he asked, perplexed at not seeing an image appear immediately. It takes a couple of minutes to develop. He looked at the print again. My lovely, sexy, and smiling face began to emerge. He was delighted, grinning from ear to ear, like Ralphie opening his Red Ryder BB gun carbon action 200 slot air rifle in A Christmas Story. So very cool, he said with boyish glee. I'm a bit of a photog myself, and I've never used a real antique like this before. Now, other real photographers might have taken offense at his use of the terms like photog and antique. I was not so thin-skinned, and he was very cute. Can I keep it? The picture, I mean. I don't know, young man. Can you? Travis smirked. May I keep the photo, ma'am? I want something to remember you by. You're quite the charmer, Travis. Yes, you may keep the photo, but if I have my way with you tonight, you have something much better to remember me by. This rendered Travis speechless. He gulped comically. If his shirt had a collar, he would have tugged at it. I couldn't judge him too harshly for his reaction in my come-on. His fantasies were going to come to fruition. Just a couple of requests, I said. Name it, he said nervously. I pushed a key to my motel room across the table into his hand. It wasn't the programmable kind. It was an old-fashioned conventional key fastened to a large orange tag. The motel address and room number were emblazoned on both sides. I'm going to leave here in a minute. Wait 15 more and pay my bill. You don't mind buying a lady dinner, do you? No, not at all. I'd say you're a cheap date. His face became flushed. He must have thought he stepped over the line with his cheap date remark. But there was no danger of aborting my mission now. In for a penny, in for a pound. Well, good, I said, and park a few blocks away, down the street from the motel. Discretion, you know. And there would be no paper trail traceable to me. Absolutely. His eager agreement to my terms made me wonder if he was cheating on a younger girlfriend who couldn't go out after curfew. If so, fine. He'll be all the more deserving. I was careful to retrieve the torn photo of the trucker. I left the torn edges with a cocktail napkin, so I wouldn't get his nasty blood in my purse. Without another word, I stood to leave. His youthful lack of manners being what they were, he remained seated. As I go out the door, I blew him a kiss and flashed an exaggerated wink. I assumed his erection was pressing against the buttonfly of his 501s firmly. Maybe that's why he didn't stand up. I drove back to the motel to prepare for our rendezvous. There was a slight knock at my motel room door exactly 20 minutes later. "I am the gatekeeper," I said impishly, "and you are the keymaster." Travis used the key to enter, closing the door behind him quickly. He was greeted with the sight of me on top of the sheets, completely naked except for a sexy pair of stilettos. "Well, come and get it, cowboy," I said seductively. Not that he needed more enticement or invitation. He stripped quickly and comically, catching his right foot on the inside-out leg of his pants. His muscular, athletic build did not disappoint, nor did another vital part of his anatomy. Within seconds, he was on top of me, doing his business, faster than you could say point and shoot. After our marathon session, Travis stood to get dressed. "Well, I'm disappointed, stud," I said. "You're not up for more?" "Well, I'm expected..." He cut himself off, almost revealing that some young thing at home, or possibly overbearing parents with whom he still resided, would be curious as to his whereabouts. "No problem," I said, reassuring him. "I have to hit the road early tomorrow morning anyway." Well, this morning, I sat up in bed giving him one more look at my beautiful naked bod. "One last thing," I said sweetly. "You have your keepsake." I pointed to the photo of me he took, carelessly tossed on the cheap pressboard dresser. "I want my keepsake too." "Well, sure," he said hesitantly. Just let me get dressed." I slowly moved my finger back and forth. "Oh no, young man. I want to remember you just as you are right now. Bloody starkers." My British slang went over his head. "Naked, baby," I said. "Stark naked." Of course, bloody starkers for me had a double meaning. He considered briefly how this might bite him in the ass later. I don't know about that." "Don't worry, lover. I'm not going to digitize and plaster it all over the internet. I just want a sexy photo of you for my private collection. Besides, for all you know, I videotaped us fucking with a hidden camera all the time." Instead of making him more nervous, Travis actually got turned on. He was becoming aroused again. "If you did, maybe I could get a copy? And maybe we'll have a time for another go after the photo?" he said, beginning to breathe heavy. "Absolutely, dear. But first things first." I got out of bed to grab the Polaroid knockoff from where I'd hid it in the closet. I pointed it at Travis, who was still standing naked, looking awkward with his dumbfounded expression and resurrected erection. "Give me your best pose, stud." He flexed his biceps and twisted his body a bit, imitating Arnold Schwarzenegger's classic Mr. Universe pose. I have to say, it was not bad at all. "Well, go ahead," Travis teased. "Take a picture." Well, I had to oblige. What choice did a red-blooded girl have? Later, I was packed and ready to go. I shoved Travis's clothes into a plastic laundry bag provided by the motel. I found a few items of interest in his wallet, most notably an impressive wad of cash for a young buck. In my mind, that confirmed he had a lot of disposable income, since he didn't have the nuisance of paying rent while living in his parents' basement. I pocketed the small treasures from my young lover's billfold. They could come in handy in my travels. I was sitting at the writer's desk with a chipped ashtray sitting to my right. Imprinted on the interior surface, partially obscured by cigarette butt grime, was the flashy logo of the Eli Motor Lodge. I took 2 pieces of the trucker's photo from my purse and put them in the ashtray. I lit the edge of both pieces with my Bic. The small flame, hesitant to grow at first, soon found the photo tasty and consumed it down to black char within a few seconds. While it burned, I recalled the fondness of the trucker's scream as I tore the photo in two. I used the Bic again to light a ciggy. I didn't smoke often, but it was so satisfying after sex and disposing of bad rubbish. I washed the ashtray in the sink and left a $5 bill for the maid who would have to clean it up my mess. I was again reclined on the bed, the sheets torn away from my mattress during my marathon session with Travis. I opened my photo album. There was an available spot next to the recently added photo of Jake. I looked at the photo of Travis. Typically, the camera's magical auto zoom provides a close-up of my subject's natural face. But not this time. The print displayed Travis's gorgeous naked physique, head to toe. In the photo, he had thrown his arms in front of his face in some kind of futile defense maneuver against the invisible predator. But all his goodies were on film for me to enjoy for the foreseeable future. I put Travis's photo next to Jake's. This made for an interesting side-by-side comparison. One less bloated slob and one less boy toy in the world. I needed to get going. Someone would be missing Travis soon. It could be his distraught mother or his furious girlfriend, or both. Regardless, the local police would be called upon soon to begin the pointless search for the late Travis. I loaded my belongings into the convertible's truck. I packed my magic Polaroid carefully. I caressed its surface before cushioning it with a blanket. There were more potholes than streets in Eli. No automatic checkout at the Eli Motor Lodge. I was at the front desk in the lobby. The geezer on day shift was tallying my bill. He took his sweet time as he sneaked glances at my cleavage. He wasn't subtle. He licked his cracked lips over his dentures, admiring my jugs pressed together by the sleeveless white blouse tied into a halter. He told me the amount due and payable. I had to ask him to repeat the figure. His throat was in desperate need of clearing, and it was impossible to decipher what words he was gargling through his phlegm. I used the money I appropriated from Travis. He wouldn't be needing it any longer. Before the trip, I'd used my visa with the manufactured identity to reserve the room. Now I was happy to reduce the paper trail by paying cash on the barrel now. On the counter was a small selection of cheap souvenirs. Among them was a stack of badly printed bumper stickers. "Excuse me," I said. "How much are these?" The dirty old man continued to stare at my tits. For a moment I considered getting my special camera and taking a photo of the old fart. One less dirty old man in the world. But the camera was already packed away, and there would be more interesting subjects down the road. It wouldn't be worth the effort of covering my tracks to get a picture of Methuselah here. "Hey, Grandpa," I said, raising my voice and pointing to my eyes. "Up here." He adjusted his gaze from my chest to my face, with great reluctance and effort. "Well, I'm sorry, Missy," he said. "What was that?" I said, "How much were these bumper stickers?" He smiled with a leer, with the bluntness and lack of filter that old men can sometimes get away with. Well, sometimes. "For you, little darling? You take one for nothing. Hell, take two, they're small. Courtesy of your admiring motel clerk." I smiled outwardly, retching at the back of my throat. I took him up on his offer and took 2 bumper stickers. I peeled off the adhesive strip of one of the bumper stickers. It took some doing, as it was quite old. I put it on the rear bumper of the convertible. It wasn't my bumper to decorate, of course, but the message was appropriate and irresistible. The message read, "I survived Route 50. I pulled out of the motel parking lot and left Eli, Nevada. I continued my journey down the loneliest road in America. Route 50 turned out to be a lot more fun than I could ever have imagined. I looked forward to meeting more colorful folks as I continued my journey. The wind flowed through my hair. It was a wonderful feeling against my neck. Temperatures would rise later, but for now, the early morning chill was crisp and rejuvenating. The travels of a freelance photojournalist were mighty fine indeed. The trucker, clad in black, and his perverse brethren had been vanquished. The blonde photographer, in her red convertible, now seeks new subjects and unsuspecting prey.
Well, folks, no moral, no message I can think of other than possibly this. If you see a gorgeous blonde in a red mini dress and she's pointing a weird looking Polaroid camera your way, do what you can to shield yourself from its effects, although that effort may be hopeless and futile. I truly hope you enjoyed tonight's story. I hope now to uh, let's look now at some of your comments during the story. Mr. Weber, if you would. Okay, well, oh, here we go. Raphael, well, I am curious as if some of your hunches played out. I have to clarify what those might be, but I have a feeling that the very intelligent and perceptive members of our audience might have seen a few things coming, or maybe, hopefully, were misdirected successfully by yours truly. Do you have anything else, John? Yes, on that topic, Chris. Well, if I may say so, that was a bit of misdirection on my part when writing the story. I wanted you to think it was going a certain way, and it took a turn, quite literally. I thought it was very interesting that you made the comment around the time that the narrator herself acknowledged it. So kudos to both of you for spotting that. Oh, Raphael, well, thank you. I'm glad that we could surprise you and that you enjoyed the exploits and the revenge of our protagonist / antagonist tonight. Oh, and one final comment, it looks like, from Weber Internet Thingy, Mr. John Weber himself. Mr. Townsel, where do you get your sick and twisted ideas? Well, Stephen King makes a joke, my favorite author, as many of you know, that he gets his ideas at the local Five and Dime. Well, I'll be a little bit more direct in my response. I get my ideas from the most extraordinary to the most ordinary circumstances that I experience in life. For example, under the category of ordinary, one time when driving home from work, I passed by the local courthouse, and that gave me the idea for the lead story in this collection, Fury Duty. And of course, there are also some extraordinary circumstances in my life, such as my recent visits to the hospital and where I made visits to hell and back again, as documented in Hell and Wellness. So yes, it could come from anywhere, anytime, any place is the short answer, John. Thank you for asking. And you're not going to find anything ordinary. You're going to find everything extraordinary about what's coming this coming week from WeberNet Internet Thingy Productions. Most notably, tomorrow, can't wait for this one. Special guest Craig Lubin joins us tomorrow, December 15th, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Our third installment of Retro for the Holidays. We're going to be having a great holiday watch party with the Star Wars Holiday Special. Oh boy, if you thought Santa Claus Conquers the Martians was tough, wait till you check this out if you haven't already. It's a great, well, maybe that's not the right word, but it's a notorious addition to the Star Wars mythos. You don't want to miss it tomorrow night as the three of us watch the Star Wars Holiday Special on Retro Rangers. And later this week, Thursday, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. I know I'll be there. If you need to watch and listen to Mr. Weber's Webo Mystery. This week, another heartwarming, but I would say very mysterious and suspenseful Sherlock Holmes mystery from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, this time with a little bit of a holiday flavor. The Blue Carbuncle. Let's listen all together on Thursday when Mr. Weber presents this great classic tale from Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes. And finally, next week at this time, in this time slot, its usual time slot, we have an all-new Retro Trekkers. Yes, we are starting a tantalizing new trilogy. Maybe we'll call it a trilogy. It is, of course, Trials and Titillation. The first part is going to be looking at Harry Mudd in the original series, Mudd's Women. There they are with Captain John and Commander Joe. And, well, we'll just leave comments alone on the imagery there. but it's going to be a great fun trilogy, and we'll be looking at other ones in this 3-part series. So please join us next Saturday for that. It's going to be a blast, and I had a blast tonight sharing another Dreadtime story with you. Thanks so much for joining me. Yes, it exactly is, Raphael, right up our collective alleys to be sure. And we're going to have even more fun in the coming days. So again, as John points out, we will be having another Dreadtime story sometime in January. So look for announcements on that. But in the meantime, stay frightened, my friends. Thanks. We'll see you next time.
JoeTownsel.com is ready for you, with stories to chill you right through and through. Tales of terror and fright for your dark winter's night. At JoeTownsel.com, your screams will ring true. There's horror for holidays, wrapped with a bow. These books will give shivers high and low. Make your Christmas time weird with the stories you feared. JoeTownsel.com is the best place to go. Joe Townsel brings cheer in so many ways as your beating heart sinks and each jangling